In recent years, they have tried to rebrand themselves as a modern, open organisation, but the Freemasons have long been dogged by conspiracy theories, scandal and the image of a secretive society. Now, a new book claims to set the record straight on the Masons' links to some of the most notorious criminals and cases in history, from Jack the Ripper to the Great Train Robbery and the East End Cray Twins. Crime and the Craft has been written by the former Met detective Mike Neville.
As a senior detective, I was always fascinated by the history of crime, and I'm a Freemason in many different lodges, so the history of the both came together. And just looking at the fascinating, the goodies and baddies to see what they'd done and what crimes they'd been involved in.
Yeah, I mean, your time at Scotland Yard, you were aware of the crimes that were going on, but then you've made these connections back to, the likes of the road rage killer.
Kenneth Noye.
Kenneth Noye, yeah.
Well, what I was concerned with is that you go on the internet, you read about someone like Kenneth Noye, and it said, oh, he was a Freemason, master of his lodge, proposed and recommended by two corrupt police officers, and directing this criminal empire. And of course, as a detective, I like to look at the facts, and when I look at the facts, I get hold of the paperwork, and it's just untrue. It's proposed and seconded by two scrap metal dealers, and he was never more than the steward in the lodge. He was the guy who pours out the wine as people have their dinner. So I think it's important that we recognise, yes, Kenneth Noye was a Freemason. That was a big mistake, but he was dismissed as soon as he'd been found guilty of crimes. So it's a case of balancing. It's like the Jack the Ripper case. If you watch the From Hell film, it's all this big Masonic conspiracy, and the Freemasons try and bump off Johnny Depp, who's Fred Aberline, and his assistant, who's Robbie Coltrane. But of course, when you look into it, it turns out that Fred Aberline joined the lodge the year after, so it can't have been that bad, whatever the Masons were up to.
So actually, what you found is that these connections aren't necessarily as dark and as secretive as they may appear.
Absolutely. I mean, some of the greatest developments in forensic science, like the first fingerprint expert, the first top detective at the yard, Sir Bernard Spilsbury, who really professionalised the investigation of murder. Wilcox, who was a man who said you could distinguish human blood at a crime scene. DNA, images, all these developments have been made by Freemasons. Now, along the line, of course, there's been some scoundrels who've been Freemasons as well, and they've been convicted and sent to prison.
For your time then, exploring all of this for this book, what were some of the more fascinating things that you actually uncovered? Well,
I think some of the interesting, meeting Nipper Reid, who caught the Cray Twins, he's 92, and I met him up at a lodge in Hertfordshire, and I said, Nipper, do you mind people knowing you're a Mason? He said, no, it's too late to worry about such things. And he said to me, he'd never been the master of his lodge. I said, why weren't you the master of the lodge, Nipper? He said, well, I thought it might have been hard work. I thought, well, it must have been harder work catching the Cray Twins. But the Jack the Ripper thing, I think people are fascinated by that. And Stephen Knight comes up about this, like 3 Freemasons and conspiracy. I found 34 Freemasons involved in that case. Half of them are police officers from top to bottom. Some of them are doctors. The first offender profiling was by Dr. Bond, who was a Freemason at the time of the Jack the Rippers. And some suspects, some new suspects. A man called Deeming, who was an Australian murderer, hanged. He actually killed people up in my own county of Lancashire, cut his family's throats, and the New York Times said he was Jack the Ripper, and we've just uncovered now he was a Freemason in Australia. So there's some new suspects there.
There we go, the former Met detective Mike Neville there, with details of that investigation into the Freemasons, and he is an open member of the Freemasons. Happy for people to know. Right.